Hello, my name is Tyler Dagliano, and today I will be sharing my experiences as a Virginia Fisheries and Aquatic Wildlife Center intern. So it's important to note that when I started there as an intern, I knew almost nothing about freshwater mussels. I was interested in aquatic biology, but mostly in fish. And so I had no experience working with or understanding the life cycle or life history of freshwater mussels. I pretty much just found the internship on the DGIF, currently Department of Wildlife Resource website, and applied because it looked interesting and I was ready to learn about them. So, upon my first few days as an intern there, I learned about the life cycle of a mussel because it's very important to what we do at the hatchery. So, an adult mussel will release glycodia. Those are like baby freshwater mussels, and they'll attach onto a host fish. And they do this because they need to take the nutrients that they need to grow from the host fish because they can't do it on their own quite yet. So, they live as a parasite and they attach onto the gills and fins of the host fish. And then once they're on there, each species is on the host fish for a different number of days, can be as little as a few days or as much as a few weeks. They'll fall off, and at this point, they're juvenile mussels. So if they land in suitable habitat, they'll continue to grow to the point where they become adult mussels, and the cycle will continue. However, the populations are actually declining. They're very susceptible to pollution and habitat loss. And so, of the 77 freshwater mussel species we have in Virginia, 39 of those are either federally or state endangered or state threatened. So, the population numbers are definitely declining from what we've seen. And it's important to try to get an understanding of why they might be and how we can help them. So, how do we help? In the most basic terms, the way that we help the mussels grow is by removing barriers that would prevent glycodia from reaching adulthood. So if you look at the top left of your screen, you'll see an adult mussel releasing glycodia into the water. Some mussels actually have lures, or they use parts of their body as lures to bring in fish for the glycodia to attach to. However, some species don't have those, and this one that you see on the top left is one of those. They kind of just release them haphazardly and hope that the glycodia get to where they need to go. So the way that we help them is we'll put the adult mussels that are about to release the glycodia into a tank with the fish that you see, some of the fish that you see on the top right. Like I said, many different species have different fish that they need. So we have a bunch of different fish species. But these on the top right are one of the species that we use. And so we'll put them in the same tank to make sure that they attach to the fish. And we'll also make sure that the fish don't have too many attached to them because we also want to keep our host fish healthy. So we do it in a way to where we make sure that everybody comes out good. And then once we're done with that stage and they fall off and they become juvenile mussels, we bring them into the room that you see on the top left of your screen. This room is a very controlled environment. We pump the water in from the ponds, but we have the ability to filter out some of the water, and we can also change the temperature of the water to fit the needs of the mussels, because at this point, they're still very weak, they're still very small, and we're trying to keep as many of them alive to adulthood as possible. So once they're growing and strong, we then move them into another room. This room is still, it's in a room, it's in an enclosure, so we can monitor them easily, but we aren't messing with the water so much. It's closer to the environment that they're going to see upon release. And then if you look at the top right of your screen, these are the baskets that we use to keep them in our outdoor ponds. So at this point, the mussels are actually outdoors and we keep them in these baskets so that way we can keep them safe from things that are around, but also get them acclimated to outdoor environments. This is the last place the mussels are going to go before we release them. So if you look inside the basket here, these are actually pretty large mussels. They're pretty close to adult size at this point. And so why do we help them? I've explained that the populations were declining because of habitat loss and pollution, but beyond that, they actually provide some ecosystem services to us. They're filter feeders, and so when they feed, they're actually removing algae and sediments and nutrients and other unwanted things from the rivers. And then when you get a community or a population of healthy mussels in one spot, it's called a mussel bed. And a mussel bed can actually be its own habitat for other species. So they can help out other species in the river too. And furthering helping other species, they can be a food source for other animals like raccoons, otters, muskrats. I said that we keep them in enclosed baskets to keep them away from things that could potentially hurt them. And so this is a perfect example of that. This is actually from what we saw as a river otter that had made its way into our ponds, and it swims down to the bottom because some of our mussels do make their way out of the baskets. And then you also have some invasive clams in there too. And they were basically swimming down, grabbing as many of the clams and mussels that they could, coming right back up to the top, eating them, and then throwing the shells right on top of our baskets. Luckily, they didn't get into this baskets or into the other ones, so our baskets are doing their job, but it was just funny seeing them put the shells right on top of the mussels that we were trying to protect. But moving on in this video, you'll see that there's mussels in the left tank and no mussels in the right tank. And we put mud in each of the tanks, and they have aerators to keep the water moving. And you can see the tank with mussels is actually going to clear up that water. If you just keep watching over time, you see the water is going to get more and more and more clear. And that's because the mussels are actually filtering out the sediments that are suspended in the water. I was actually taking water samples throughout the time that the mussels were in here. And you can see on this graph, this shows the particles per milliliter of water every 25 minutes. So if you look at the top line, the blue one, that shows the tank that didn't have any mussels. And you'll see that there's a slight decline in the amount of particles that we sampled, but nothing compared to the amount with the mussels in it. The mussels, as you can see, removed many of the particles of mud. And then this graph can account for some of the small changes that we saw in the one without mussels. This shows the particle size of the particles suspended in the water. And so what this shows is that the particle sizes got smaller over time. So we believe that the larger sediments were settling out to the bottom, even though we had the filter moving, it's not going to keep everything off the bottom. So where do I fit into the whole equation? So the first thing I did, or one of the first things that I would do when I would get there, like in the beginning of the morning, is I would make sure that everything was running smoothly for the mussels and for the fish, and make sure that they had a healthy living environment. So this looked like taking water samples to make sure the water chemistry was looking good, getting the water temperature, and making sure that everything was fed. And then I would also go through and clean out some of the filters that we use to clean their water. So making sure that the mussels and fish both had healthy living environments is one thing that I did. I also helped count and tag the mussels. And so we counted the mussels because we want to have an accurate count of how many we're releasing, how many are, successfully growing into adults, so we know how well we're doing. And then we also track their growth to make sure that they're growing at the appropriate rate we would expect, and that there's nothing, crazy going on that would prevent them from reaching adulthood. And then I also helped make some of the stuff that we use. So I helped create some of these baskets. We cut out special netting on the bottom to make sure that the sediment they like to sit in won't sink through. And we also attach the pool noodles. It can be kind of a fun process making them if, you make it a fun time. So the major takeaways: I learned about the life cycle of mussels and the current state of freshwater mussels in Virginia. I learned the steps that we can take to help restore freshwater mussels and the positive benefits of having them in our rivers. I also learned how to use new equipment like the water sampler that I had used, and I learned how to apply some of the information I learned in class into real world uses like the water chemistry stuff. And then I also had the amazing ability to work with a great team. Special thanks to Amy, Bryce, Ben, and John. Those were the group of people that I worked with while I was there, and they were absolutely amazing. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to any questions you have. Thank you.